you a woman in medicine feeling overwhelmed and disconnected from the personal fulfillment that you desire? You're in the right place. Join Doctors Joanne and Aaron as they rewrite the rules for women in medicine. Let's begin.
In this episode, I am so excited to have my good friend Hilda Guerrero as my guest. Joanne should be joining us in the next episode. And for today, I would love for you to hear about Hilda's journey. She is a second grade teacher. She is creating programs, infusing personal development into her second grade curriculum, which I'm so excited to hear more about. And our paths cross because, like Joanne and I, Hilda has become invested in personal growth and development for herself. And we met at a business conference last year. And I've just been so inspired by how she is infusing personal development into her teaching curriculum. And I would love to hear more about how your personal growth and development started, Hilda.
Sounds great. Thank you, Erin. Thank you so much for having me. Well, where do I begin in terms of personal development? Well, I guess it should say that I've always been sort of a personal development student. And when I met or ran across Brendan's work, I started taking his classes. He has a program, Growth Day, which led me to a conference where we met. And I was so inspired by his work. It actually started to give me ideas of how I could incorporate all the concepts and skills that I was learning, and how can I adapt those concepts and teach them to 7-year-olds. And that's where my journey began.
And so share with us a little bit about maybe how common is personal growth and development in the community of teachers?
As far as I know, it's actually rare. I don't hear much about it. Since the pandemic, there was definitely lots of conversations surrounding social and emotional learning, which is still, that conversation is still continuing, and many districts are offering resources with that type of support for students. But in terms of teaching students personal development skills in the classroom setting, I honestly don't know of anyone doing that right now.
And what I found is I maybe it's becoming more common now. I know as a physician in medicine, personal growth and development isn't that common. And yet for me, it was what allowed me to get out of burnout. It was what allowed me to go from feeling like a victim in my life to feeling empowered. And I wonder for you, is there a story you can share about maybe a pivot that happened for you because of your journey in personal growth and development that might be inspirational to someone else who might be considering it after listening to us talk about it on this podcast, to go, oh, maybe there's something there. Any story you'd like to share with our listener?
I think what has resonated the most with me in many of Brendan's message is how we have the power to be the architect of our lives and to generate what we want and how we feel. That was so empowering for me to learn that. And I just started to learn many skills, such as creating a morning routine that really focused on self-care, and planning out my day, taking the time to really organize my day, set priorities. And it didn't take long for me to realize how beneficial it was for me and the difference it was making in my life day to day, being able to start off strong mentally, spiritually, physically, having the time where what I call my CEO time in the morning. I have my own morning meeting with myself where I plan things out, look at things holistically, and then narrow down what are my top tasks that I need to accomplish, or at least strive to accomplish by the end of the day. And I've learned that having more time to think through things, my days go by a lot more smoother with more intention.
And can you contrast that, Hilda, with how your days used to start out? Because this reminds me of conversations I had with my hairdresser years ago. I've been seeing her for over 20 years. And I remember her saying, when I get up early and earlier than I need to, and I just have quiet time with myself in the morning, my day goes so much better. And at that time, I was pushing the snooze, which I don't do anymore, thankfully. I was getting up at the last minute, running around like crazy, getting my kids out the door, racing to work, usually, running late. And that doesn't sound like how you're starting your day. And yet many women who are listening to this right now might be like, I don't have time for that. How can I make a meeting with myself in the morning when I don't even have time to sleep a full night's sleep? And how might we be able to shift their perspective? I know I'm always looking for what's the tiniest little thing that they might be able to do to shift their morning in order to get more of that, what sounds like ease and productivity and empowerment for your day versus what I like to call chaos for your day, which is not how we want them to turn out.
Right. Well, two important terms that I teach in my classroom are the words comprehension skills, cause and effect. And the way I apply that in my life is the more I am in charge of causing, then the effects most likely will follow in suit. So I know it seems counterintuitive to think that getting up earlier is actually more beneficial. The immediate thought is less sleep. But I've worked around that. Of course, to gain something worthwhile sometimes takes a little sacrifice. And so I just don't do as much entertainment in the evening so that I can go to bed earlier. And by getting up earlier, I spend more time taking care of myself. As you mentioned, I'm a school teacher. So the nature of my job is pouring out to the kids I serve. And personal development has taught me that I first need to pour into myself so that I have much to give to the kids that I'm later on going to give. And that's what I do. I feel that when I'm well rested, I've had time to exercise, again, my own spiritual practice and planning out my day, I show up more fully present, ready to be there, fully prepared to help the kids have a good quality experience in the classroom.
I love that. And one of the themes that we are bringing up, I think more and more often in this podcast, is the term return on investment. And for someone who is a business owner, the return on your investment, when we think of it, if I spend an hour, or let's say I spend 30 minutes listening to the Create Meaning in Medicine podcast, if I spend 30 minutes, is that going to save me that much more time? What's the return on my investment of my time, my energy, and my money? And what I heard you saying is when you invest a small amount of extra time in your morning to create the day that you want, you show up differently. And you didn't start it that morning. You actually started it the day before by shutting things down. I'm assuming getting to bed as early as you need to, subtracting what wasn't important, like entertainment or TV or doom scrolling on social media, whatever that device is, in order to set up having those extra few minutes. And yet you find, what are the biggest benefits that you find when you show up after having your morning routine?
Well, this practice actually started before I joined Growth Day, when I was assigned a student that needed lots of my time and attention. And he had high social emotional needs. And I realized within the first week, I literally was in over my head in my ability to help him. I needed to be the special ed teacher that he needed. And I started to think through, well, what can I do? And I realized early on, and just set a challenge for myself, if I can wake up 1 hour earlier and study and learn strategies on what I can do to help this boy, then it's a win-win for all of us. It helps him. It helps everyone in the classroom. It gives us all a better learning experience. And what I didn't realize back then, it was simultaneously teaching me to be more disciplined and structured with my own day by doing that. Okay, if I'm going to get up earlier, what do I need to do at night to make sure that I am well rested 1 hour earlier so that I can do these things? And so my morning practice has evolved since then, since doing that. And to answer more fully your question, what I do after I do my self-care time is my creating time, which is what I'm working on with this product. It gives me time to work on something that's really important to me, that I care a lot about. And it gives me that sacred morning time where there are no interruptions to fully focus on something I'm really passionate about. And I can't describe in words the feeling I get when I walk through that door, ready to drive off to my job, knowing that I had time for myself and time for my passion project.
And I just want to expand on that a little bit, Hilda, because what I heard you saying is that you created space in your day. We all have 24 hours in the day. You intentionally created space. You learned to be more disciplined with how you use your time. And what I heard you say is when we talk about the return on your investment, there was not only a ripple effect on you and the student that you were specifically working with. And is this the student that I remember you sharing? You read 7 books?
Yes.
Books for one student because you wanted to be the right teacher, and you recognized you can't do that if you're depleted. You can't do that if you do like maybe a typical teacher and don't read 7 books on this one student's needs. And then there's a ripple effect. When you're doing better, you're going to interact with your students differently, and that student differently, and he's going to react with the rest of the classroom differently. And it sounds like this synergistic positive effect that spreads throughout the classroom. And I would assume then not only then, creates more positivity and momentum for the next day and the next weeks. I wonder, how did that even spill into the positive ripple effect when these children then transitioned into their next year of schooling and how they interacted with their next year's teacher?
Right. Well, I went to a different school, so unfortunately I didn't get to see the kids that I had that year as much, but I can just speak for what that experience was within that year. The more I learned through books, through videos, audios on how to help this one particular student, the more changes I saw in him. And the more adapted he was to this school setting, then he was learning, the kids are learning, and it just set the temperature, the climate in the room in a much better setting for all kids to learn. I felt it was worth the investment. Like I said, it's a win-win. I help him, and by helping him, I help all kids because it gives everyone a chance to, arrive at a place where kids have the setting to learn.
And when I hear you say that, it also makes me think of the relationship between healthcare providers and their patients. And, if this child didn't have what they needed, if your patient doesn't have what they need when they're showing up to your office or to the hospital for their surgery, and they don't have the ability to meet their own needs, sometimes the clinicians are asked to step in differently. How can we interact differently with patients in order to have better outcomes for everyone involved as well? So my hope is that our listener can find some nuggets of wisdom from what you're sharing, Hilda, with your unique approach to teaching, which also includes, learning yourself and pouring into yourself in order to better pour into your students, that our healthcare providers are hearing that and getting curious about, I wonder how I might be able to apply these lessons to my life. And with that, I would love to hear more. You've shared stories with me about how you are infusing personal development into your second grade classroom, empowering these children to learn more about what the cause and effect relationship of their choices. Explain to us a little bit about how you've managed to infuse that into your classroom in a manner that works for second graders, and maybe in ways that we can learn either for our own selves in our households or maybe with our own kids.
Okay, sure. Well, I'd like to also address the second part of what I'm teaching, which is social and emotional development in children. Again, when we came back from the pandemic, that seemed to be the area that most districts were interested in educating their teachers to teach students. So I've done a lot of work in that area. And if I may just briefly explain a little of that, what I learned from the student several years back was, for example, he was having emotional or anger outbursts in the classroom. And I started to study, what can I do to help this student with this. And then it dawned on me when I saw him basically releasing his anger that way, hitting a desk, throwing, kicking, screaming. I wasn't seeing a child with bad behavior. I was seeing a child who was experiencing distress and intense emotions and simply didn't have the language acquired to release those emotions in a more calm, gentle, productive way. And pulling in from my background, I have a master's degree in teaching English as a second language. So I have a lot of experience with language development. I used that experience to teach him how to express his needs, how to vocalize, giving him language frames, how to self-regulate his emotions, how to have healthier communication with his peers. And the consequence or the effect of that, he was building better connections in school. And you all know what happens when that happens. They feel better about their environment and where they go if they feel more closely connected. And I mentioned those aspects first. I'm referring to the work of Abraham Maslow, the initial hierarchical needs of all of us are physiological, then the need to be safe. And the third one is the need for love and belonging. And when those three are to a large extent met, that's when I feel a child is most ready to move on to those other needs that you're addressing with personal development. That's where I teach students about goal setting, about striving for what they want, we talk about negative and positive self-talk and organizing their morning routines and planning out their days and all of these skills. And you would think 7-year-olds, are they even capable? And I'm here to testify, yes, they are very capable. And a little guy say, guess what, teacher? I made some adjustments to my morning routine this morning. So they definitely can understand the idea of what I was explaining earlier about being the architect of your life.
Well, there's some great inspiration for our listener about, if the 7-year-old in second grade can find adjustments to their routine, my hope is that if you recognize, you're aware that there are areas to your routine that aren't serving you, how can you make adjustments that might fine tune, even if it's just one tiny little correction and you're consistent with it. As we share commonly on here, you don't need to make big changes, but even tiny little changes implemented consistently can really shift your outcomes over the long term.
Absolutely. We have those discussions every day.
Hilda, you mentioned a couple times about language, and I am such a fan of using good language when we speak to ourselves and also how we communicate with others. And I would love to have you expand a little bit more about your understanding of language and how you use it to your advantage in the school setting.
Sure. As I mentioned, my master's degree is teaching English as a second language. That emphasis, however, was more on academic language, but what I'm pivoting over more towards is teaching social language and emotional language for students that need it. I started with the student several years ago when I noticed he was having emotional outbursts. And I mentioned earlier what I was noticing, the behaviors that he was expressing as he was releasing. And I sat with him one day and said, here's what I saw happen. What if I teach you a different way to release those strong emotions you're feeling? And that's when I started to teach him language frames of how to express, identify what he's feeling, what he's thinking, and how to express that in a way that's more respectful and more effective and productive.
And I can liken this situation to many physicians and healthcare providers are simply exhausted and overwhelmed, burnt out, maybe suffering from some mental health, anxiety, depression. Some of them may be suicidal thoughts. It can get pretty ugly in there. And so I wonder, is there something that you could share with our listener that when you are at rock bottom and you have nothing left in the tank and you're frustrated, angry, upset, is there something that you can share that would be helpful?
Sure. Well, as I learned and was teaching students whose language was a different language other than English, many times when they don't have the language yet, they use gestures, hand gestures. So, what I teach my students in correlating this with social and emotional learning, I have them give me a hand gesture of where they are emotionally, and if it's above their head, that means a 10. So I give them strategies on how they can de-escalate their own basically emotionally regulate themselves. And when they get to a level that they can now speak calmly about what they're thinking and feeling, then I give them different phrases on what they can say. For example, using I statements, I felt this when someone did. Examples such as that. I also teach them language frames on when they are in the role of listening to someone, what I call empathy language, and how to be receptive and show the person you're listening to that you are paying attention, that you're validating how they're feeling. One example I have of that is recently I had parent conferences and a mom said, that her student is talking differently, and some of the things that he's saying is shocking her, but she was laughing about it. And I just chuckled with her. I said, can you give me an example? And she said, okay. She says, the other day I came home from work and I was pretty upset about what had happened. I explained to my son what happened. And her 7-year-old said to her, Mom, I'm really sorry to hear you went through that. I can see why that bummed you out. I would have been bummed out too. And she just stepped back and thought, who is this talking to me with this type of language? I just smiled and said, that's exactly what we're working on. I'm teaching them how to be attentive listeners, how to validate how people are feeling, how to offer suggestions if the person is wanting suggestions, what we call active listening skills. I actually have 4 or 5 students in my class that are called friendship helpers, so that if any other child needs someone to talk to, those other students are trained on how to listen with empathy and to give back encouragement and feedback. And I just think it's such an important role because, as I mentioned, I've been teaching for 28 years, and usually when a child has problems, social, emotional, they see the teacher as the sole problem solver. But by equipping them, I'm moving them away from that paradigm or that dynamic where they're now seeing themselves as capable of communicating their thoughts and feelings, and they're seeing themselves as being this supportive community of helping their peers as well. And thankfully, I can say that most of the issues that come most often after recess, those problems are getting solved amongst themselves now because they have the language skills on how to go through those conflict resolution strategies through the language frames that I've taught them.
Wow, that is so powerful. I love how I just picture these tiny little humans interacting in such a emotionally mature way, some ways that sometimes even us adults can't do. And so I'm going to sum up a little bit here on some of the messages that I heard you share with us today, Hilda, is that you found that when you invested in yourself and poured into yourself, you were able to create different outcomes in the classroom with your students. You found the extra time and capacity that you needed to level up your skills to deal with one specific student. And it sounds like there was a ripple effect that then happened. And so as I think about parallels in medicine, what if about that one really challenging patient? And if you were to find the resources to level up for that patient, how much more better prepared will you be for the patients that are less complex? You shared with us ideas of the cause and effect, and how we are empowered to better understand the cause and effect behind our own actions, and that you are able to take issues that you're learning about in your own personal growth and development journey and your own expertise and pouring into yourself by constantly learning. And you talked about some of the different things that might not be known to our listener. Growth is something that's put together, a Growth Day, an app by our mentor, Brendon Burchard. And Brendon Burchard is a personal development guru that we both follow and have learned from. There's lots of different resources out there, but basically taking what you're learning and then actually expanding that by sharing it with your classroom. And even as I'm hearing you share about these kids who are, you're raising their awareness about how they feel and using body language in addition to verbal language, giving them ways to identify how they feel, which to our listener, that can be very powerful. I'm feeling really frustrated right now, and sometimes that will take the edge off. And then also being on the receiving end of somebody who might be having a tough day, sharing about empathy language, how to actively listen. And I just think of that you're saying, and by helping expand those skills, not only role modeling it yourself, but teaching others, I think you're decreasing the workload because now they are becoming part of the collective solution. And medicine, it's so complicated right now, and there's so much talk about what a mess medicine is, which I think teaching and school systems are in a bit of a similar circumstance. And yet you are owning what power you have, what you have control over, and you are helping empower others to be part of the solution instead of a passive bystander. So my hope is that our listener can really take some powerful takeaways from lessons from a second grade teacher. And Hilda, if our listener would like to learn more about you or what you're doing, how can they find you?
Okay. Well, right now I'm creating a software product for teachers to be able to teach these skills to their students. I thought, what if I go beyond my classroom and help empower other teachers? And I have a website. It's not set up yet, but it will be called peacefullyproductivekids.com. And so in the interim, if you'd like to reach me, my email is hguerrero. My last name is spelled Guerrero 4717 If you have any interest of what I'm creating and would like if you have any insight or comments or questions, feel free to email me. I'd love to hear from you.
Hilda, one of the questions we ask on this podcast, the name is Create Meaning in Medicine. And as you're not a physician, though, I would like to know from your aspect, how are you creating more meaning as a teacher?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, the reason why I find myself here talking to you is because of a growing need that I started to observe in the school setting. The students' social and emotional needs seem to be more and more prevalent, especially post-pandemic. As a result, many children in distress, oftentimes causing disruptions in the class, leading to teachers feeling stressed. And I just wanted to start thinking through what are some solutions to the growing problems that I see happening. And that's what I'm creating right now. I'm hoping that the work that I'm doing right now will better equip teachers to teach their students how to speak skillfully and more intentionally about what their thoughts are in a way that's more respectful, and also create a community of students within their classrooms where they're eager to support one another if they see someone who needs someone to talk to. And that's my hope. What I'm creating will have a meaningful impact, a ripple effect beyond my classroom. And I think that with anyone who finds a need or a problem, there are many solutions to different problems. And if anyone out there listening sees something that they feel very passionate about, I encourage you to be creative and aim high and to try to see what your part is in the solution.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing with us in this episode, Hilda. And
thank you.
And look for her contact information in the show notes if you'd like to learn more from Hilda. And stay tuned because our next episode is coming right up.
Do you want exclusive resources and the opportunity to connect with us? Then visit createmeaninginmedicine.com now, where you'll dive deeper into how you can create meaning in medicine. And if you're serious about optimizing your results, take 2 quick steps now. Connect with us on the website and tune in to the next episode.